So I'm going to briefly just run through the data entry, how we put what we did into the field, the data from the field into the database, then the GIS tool, and then how that's calculated in the database, the final score. So just briefly, this is the database. On data main, you have several options. We've already created this record, so we'll hop over to that. And we'll briefly look at import GIS results after we've entered the data. You can also view the preliminary GIS report. Calculate score, that's after you've imported your GIS results. You can view your final score, or you can just view the data sheet. That's good for printing, sending PDF. And then review record, so if you accidentally close out while you're doing data entry, you can come back and jump back in, and that's where we'll actually access the one that's already been entered. Or you can just view record if you don't want to accidentally change anything. And duplicate record and delete record options at the bottom. So we're going to go into the one that we just did today, which is called this. Okay, so this is going to look just a little bit different from what we did in the field today. This is from our May visit, so you may see a few differences there. And in order to enter the data, you want to go in order, in tab order, because if you go, you can't jump around, or else the data entry, you have to go in tab order in order for it to work correctly. So we have the site event name and code. Those are automatically populated there after that site is created. And we have all of our information from the front page of the data sheet. And we also have a data management section here so we can see who entered it and who's checked it. All of our directions and notes. And again, everything from the first page. Like I said, there may be some differences. Like before, we had open water and pools. This time we knew that there was open water. We had been there before. And our note about crayfish. And then we just proceed through the tabs. There's also a spell check. There are a lot of pop-up boxes that come up throughout the process when you create a new form, when you submit the GIS results. So these pop-up boxes are really important, and it kind of helps you through every step of the process. So this is basically the whole second page of the data sheet. The vegetation structure at the top. So we had everything but moss in the forest community. We had no tall graminoid marsh. And then the hydrology at the bottom. You can also enter your measurements, your stream measurements, and it'll auto-populate your ratios at the end. So our third page with the hydrology stressors. And you can click through these, highlight everything that was on the list. We had mild stress, our water quality stressors. We also had right-of-way herbicide that day, and vegetation removal, and our soil stressors. And our soils were intact here. NWI of soils. So there's our first soil. Also has a spell check on the notes, our pH. It was sampled, it wasn't a permanently ponded site. And then when you need to create a new field, you populate it here, and you can cycle over using this arrow. There's our second soil profile. We had 3 that day. Here's our third and our second NWI type. And if we needed to, you could also highlight this whole column on the left where it says delete and directions on how to do it. So you can, if you created a record that you don't need to use, you can highlight that left column and get rid of it. NWI veg. So this corresponds to just the top part of the veg portion of the datasheet. And this shows this number will correspond with the next tab. And these are our NWI types and our percentages of the AA. So then that number 1, the PFO and BTN, so you could just, you type the 1, tab over, it auto-populates the NWI code, and then you can start typing in a species, and that will auto-populate, and then you put in your percent cover. And it also here, you can also scroll down on the right section. So if we wanted to enter a new species, auto-populates. I think I did that too fast. You can just start typing the name and it'll pop up. So you don't have to type the entire plant every time. And then same thing like with the soils, you just click on the far left, hit delete on the keyboard. Yes, I want to delete. And so you can delete records from the veg table as well. And then finally the photo log. These were the pictures that we took before. Fill out the disk photo column and a photo description. You can put date ranges, or sorry, you can put number ranges for each photo description. And from this tab, you can close out. And you can also go, now that you've entered all the way to the photo log, you can now go back and forth between the other tabs. So once that's entered, you will have pulled your GIS results from the GIS tool. They'll look like this. They'll come back in an Excel spreadsheet, and this is what will get imported into the database.
Sarah, could you click onto the PowerPoint and there should be a picture of what was submitted to the GIS database there? Yeah, just click that open and go to that red slide. Just hit spacebar twice. Yeah. Next one. Yep.
Okay. So this would be your post NWI map showing the 2 NWI types already mapped out, and this would get zipped into a shapefile, and then the zip shapefile is what gets submitted to the GIS tool. I can try to pull up the GIS tool.
Sure.
Okay. So I can show you that briefly as well.
Click on the picture of me, and then it's linked on the first row far right.
There we go. So this is the landing page for the GIS tool, and we'll launch the tool here. We've checked our polygons. I'm going to send this to Elizabeth. I won't submit it. So our project name, you just give it something to identify it by when it comes back. And then your input. So we would choose that shapefile, that would get pulled in, and then it would auto-populate that map on the map that you see on the right. You would submit the project, and there will be a nearly instant pop-up to show. I started that over. There will be a pop-up to show that the project has been submitted, and then you'll get an email to show that it's been submitted. So then you would go to import GIS results once you get your result back. Import it here. I won't go through the whole process, but you'll import it, and then you'll have several tabs that come up across the top so that you can match the site event ID from the data that you've entered. The database assigns a site event ID to that site. You'll match that to the GIS result, and then that's how it the two pieces talk in the database. Then once that site event ID is put in, finalize import, and then once that's finalized, it'll pull it up into the table, and then you can calculate the scores, which I'll just click that, and you get a check mark to show that it's been calculated, and you'll get your final score, which will show up here. And we got a regulatory impact score of 0.729.
And so just to show you how the site that score we took, the 0.729, what happens to that? You remember the scores, 98% of the wetlands in West Virginia score between 0 and 1, and the average score of a forested wetland was 0.68, and this one scored 0.729, so it's a little better than average as forested wetlands go. You're going to take that 0.729, and that gets entered onto the SWVM, which will look something like this. Not exactly, because this is a draft. And the SWVM has the project name, the coordinates, the site ID. If there's a mitigation provider, which there isn't, you'd put, in this case, this is just impacts. But normally, when they're submitting impacts, they also have to submit mitigation. Is that right, Brian?
Yeah, depending on what the extent of their impacts. So
right.
If they have over a 10th of an acre.
Okay. So as a default here, I just put, they're putting in lieu fee on there because they haven't figured out their impacts, so they're going to pay in lieu fee. And here's our site, number 2 Store Hollow. You enter the acres lost, so that was the size of the wetland, which was on those GIS results, so you can pull it off there, 0.4 acres. The WVWRAM score, this will go to 3 digits eventually. Right now it's sitting at 2, so that's 0.729, rounded to 0.73. The site elevation, which also the GIS results give you that as well, 767 feet. The survey date, and because it's below 3,000 feet and between May 1st and October 31st, it is in season. It's in the index period. And so it does not get a vegetation adjustment. The WVWRAM score is 0.73. The WVWRAM with the adjustment is also 0.73. No adjustment. They did it in season, or we did it in season. We were good, and that's what we want. The impact wetland classification, just for our information, was forested. And the replacement units are the acres times the adjusted WVWRAM, which is 0.29. replacement units. Notice it's units, not acres, because we had the acres over here, but it's the acres times the WVWRAM score. And so the total impacted acres were 0.4, total required replacement units are 0.29. Then we're not looking at credits at this particular site, so that's blank. So if we go to the final page, on the SWVM, if we're assuming in lieu fee, then I think it's 4 years. Is that the automatic for in lieu fee? And so that means there's a delay of 4 years between when this wetland got impacted and the new one is actually on the ground functioning. So you get a penalty. You have to pay more mitigation because of that loss, the temporal loss. So that gives you an extra 0.034 or 0.035 credits. Temporal loss to maturity. This was a forested swamp. It takes a minimum of 40 years. I think this will be corrected from 30 to 40 on the final. To get a forested wetland back, you don't get one overnight or within your 10-year monitoring period. So again, there's a penalty associated with that of 0.08. long-term protection, we're assuming that the new site will be under long-term protection, so there's no penalty there, 101 years. And so then the final balance here, there's the replacement units from part 2, then the adjusted final score with the temporal loss and loss to maturity. So the total units you need to replace are 0.412, and it shows up as a negative balance of 0.412. And again, those are not acres, those are units. That means you could put back, if you were the in lieu fee project, you could restore a wetland that was 1 acre with a score of 0.412. Or you could do half an acre with a score of 0.82. Or the IRT could decide if you destroy a forested, you have to put back a forested. And then it would have to be a forested acre, which is presumably going to have a score somewhere above, around a 0.6 or so, at least. Okay, any questions on that, the draft SWVM? We'll look at that again tomorrow for a restoration scenario to see how that would work. This is all draft, but it will probably not look too different from that.